A moment ago, the Reserve Bank Governor, Philip Lowe, was confronted at an RBA dinner last night in Perth. He was taking questions from the audience when one gentleman rose to his feet and made his views known about the bank, its board and its recent decision-making.
Do you have someone with hands-on experience of running a small business that can give you the real heads-up of what's happening in our industry? You need to have on the board some real people that are doing real things and wearing the brunt of decisions that I think you and the board, in many cases, are very isolated from actually being involved in.
They're there to represent the 26 million people who are lucky enough to live here, and they do that with distinction.
Well, I'm suggesting you talk to the real job creators.
The gentleman speaking to Philip Lowe there was Tony Seabrook. Tony is the president of the WA Pastoralists and Graziers Association. He joined me a short time ago from the wheat belt region of WA. Tony, thanks so much for your time. Why was it important for you to put those questions directly to Governor Lowe?
Look, he's out of touch. The whole board is out of touch. And when you look at the structure of the board and the people that sit on that board, there's a whole lot of reasons why they would be out of touch. And my question to the Governor was, why don't you have some really seriously practical people on that board, people at the coalface, people in manufacturing, people in small industry, in small business and exporters, farmers? Why don't you have some real people there rather than a board which seems to be it's just out of touch?
You drove several hours to make that point to him as well, didn't you?
Look, I did, and I spoke to him before the dinner, and I did 5 years ago in a similar function. I said to him, look, it's important that you actually give people like myself the opportunity to ask a question, because we've been listening to the Governor of the Reserve Bank for a long time. I don't know whether the Reserve Bank is actually listening to us. So anyway, they made time, and I think there were 4 questions that were asked of the Governor at that dinner. But it wasn't a sort of a thought bubble of the moment. This is something I've been following for decades, and in the last few days, I really felt we needed to engage with this board at a personal level.
And your response that he gave you was along the lines of, we've got our representative in Perth, they undertake consultations, please reach out to our RBA rep. How did that sit with you?
Not well at all. I mean, they should be reaching out to us. This is completely around the wrong way. When I look at the current situation that we're sitting in, we've got inflation that's been largely caused by very poor government decision-making. The spending of hundreds of billions of dollars of borrowed money to overstimulate an economy to cause the inflation. Then we've got the Reserve Bank sitting there doing whatever it can to drive inflation down. Mr. Lowe said last night that he had a plan, but it wasn't the plan that our industry could possibly survive. At 7% inflation, if it ran for 3 years, is 20%. There's no export industry in Australia today that can sustain a hit as hard as that on its bottom line. And inflation may be compensated for in Australia by CPI wage increases. It won't feature for us. As an exporter, you get what you can get, and they're not interested in what happens to our cost of production. Just not interested at all. So I just thought it was.
So explain to us how that affects you and your counterparts. 7% inflation where it is, and now on top of that, these rate rises which continued yesterday.
Well, the only way to curb inflation is to slow the economy down. And the only way you'll really effectively do that is either stop government spending or jack interest rates up. So I'm not going to criticise the Governor for doing whatever he can to control inflation. He has to. Now, I lived through inflation in the 1980s, and interest rates got up to 18, 20%. A friend of mine paid 24% in one quarter back in the mid-80s. It bankrupted him. He didn't survive it. Inflation is the most acidic, destructive thing that can ever be turned loose in your economy. And that period of inflation during the 1980s, if anyone ever wants to know what happened to manufacturing in Australia, it was that. Just purely that. We ceased to be competitive. In a very short period of time, we became not a low-cost country of production, but a high-cost. And manufacturing just withered on the vine and died. And what's left of manufacturing, agriculture is a manufacturer, is striving to succeed. But we will not be able to sustain inflation. It should never have been allowed to get going in the first place, but we need to drive it down. And I see the federal government spending money on football stadiums, on wage increases for job seeker, a whole raft of things that are inflationary. You can't get out of this mess that we're in right now without pain. It's going to cause pain, and our industry will have to pay some of the higher interest rates, as will the home buyers who got induced by stupid statements into taking on debt they should never have had in the first place. So I feel for them, but at the end of the day, the pain now would be a whole lot less than the pain they'll wear if inflation either continues to rise or stays where it is now. It's crucial that this inflationary issue is dealt with and dealt with quickly.
Tony Seabrook, did you take any comfort from the RBA review, which is going to, one of the recommendations the government says it is going to adopt is to have a dedicated monetary policy board, which is representative of various parts of the economy, and obviously small business would be one of them?
I've had a view on this before, and I walked away with the same view. You can shuffle the chairs around on the deck of the Titanic as long as you like, but the Titanic still went down with the deck chairs. And I just see this as probably an exercise in shuffling the deck chairs around. What the federal government needs to understand is they got us into this mess by borrowing, well, it's now up towards $1 trillion, but it wasn't all part of what's currently happened. But they're borrowing hundreds of billions of dollars and throwing it around the place, creating inflation. Then you've got the Reserve Bank sitting in there trying to slow inflation down by jacking interest rates up. What really needs to happen is that the federal government, the Treasurer, and the Governor of the Reserve Bank need to sit down together and sort it out. Because at the moment, you've got one organisation throwing petrol on the fire and the other one throwing water on the fire. That's absurd.
Tony Seabrook, WA Pastoralists and Graziers Association, thank you so much. Appreciate your time and thanks for joining us to reflect on your engagement with the Governor of the RBA last night. I appreciate it.
Kieran, thanks for the opportunity to put my thoughts out there.